Good morning. How in the world did I wind up here at the Antique Wireless Association and become part of your incredible museum? For 65 years, I have been carrying KeySpark around with me, adding and adding and adding to its story. Fascinated by a grandfather who was also a father to me and pertinent to my KeySpark story. He was an electrical contractor and owner of Isbell Electric Company. And then to discover that his brother, Arthur Abner Isbell, was my great uncle, and learn what his IAA call letters meant and what his life became. As Michael Milaccio, N3HLM, who graciously agreed to be my sounding board for this presentation, jolted me into the recognition of my role in wireless history. I sat and thought about what that really means and how it all came about. The radio. I love the radio. For as long as I can remember, I have loved the radio. The radio connected me to all kinds of delightful and relevant stories, to programs even as far away as Canada, in the quiet of the night. But mostly music, and mostly jazz, as it became called. I heard those saxophone players, those piano players, those trumpet players in the middle of the night. The greats born in the days of the wireless ascendance and birth of Arthur Abner Isbell, the fourth wireless operator in the United States. My father, a musician, loved Louis Armstrong, and there was no way I was not influenced and loved hearing all those high notes growing up. And thus began my journey down the stairs into the cellar of 999 Massachusetts Avenue in North Adams, Massachusetts. A high school student in a new home, a huge change in my life, and downright nosiness and curiosity sent me exploring. And the cellar became the destination that would change part of my life and lead me to the spark that would unlock the key leading to our Antique Wireless Association. The cellar was loaded with stuff to explore: business records, memorabilia, and electrical things of no meaning to me at all, and wires and gadgets and sheer mysteriously looking things. And there they were. 3 big old black albums filled with antique postcards. I was in for an unbelievable treat and a journey around the world I had never seen, nor thought I would ever see. It's 1958. My grandfather, C. Perry Isbell, and my 2 aunts had moved to Punta Gorda, Florida. Both my grandmother, Rachel Claire Ferguson Isbell, and my father, George M. Flood, had passed away in May and August of 1957, respectively. So the grief from their loss was enormous. And as with any change under circumstances filled with loss and grief, the move compounded the sense of anxiety and unease. But there was also the excitement of the unanticipated and a new home with my very own room, decorated to my liking. And then, down into the cellar, I found myself being squirreled away and hidden inside the world of exquisite postcards, a world that unraveled my feelings and jettisoned me into the imaginary but very real cultures and intrigue of that world way beyond any travel I had been able to do growing up or thought I would ever do in my life. At this point, I must celebrate my grandmother Rachel, as I feel quite sure she was most likely the keeper of the KeySpark postcards. KeySpark and I are now part of the Antique Wireless Association, and the collection's primary aim is to mentor and encourage young people to learn and become involved with its history and allow them to explore the connection of wireless history from what appears to be so far away from what they know in their world of today's technology. It is a priceless educational gift with hopes of opening their minds to lead them to reach their individual and full potential and what that means in their developing lives. And for us adults in the room, still living with the curiosity of our childhoods, we continue to learn and share our understandings and lifetime perspectives. As the AWA president and chairman of the board, Robert Hobday, N2EVG, stated in the AWA Spring 2023 Journal, quote, "The Antique Wireless Association is actively engaged in education for all age groups. For over 70 years, we have preserved and shared the history of technologies used to communicate, ranging from the first telegraph message to today's wireless text messaging. AWA is now committed to educational outreach through leveraging our world-renowned collection of artifacts and papers, the Antique Wireless Association Museum, AWA publications, and the incredible knowledge base of our members, museum staff, and friends," end quote. How on earth did I wind up here? Mattie Trudeau grew up in North Adams and married Dick Gibson. They were huge jazz aficionados and held the Colorado Jazz Party for 30 years. Living in Denver at the time, I, of course, knowing the Trudeau family, was invited to this fantastic party and attended 10 of the 30 parties. My first Colorado Jazz Party was in 1972, and I was filled with awe to meet those great musicians I had heard on the radio. I was blown away every Labor Day weekend, 6-hour sets, and I wondered how I would last that long. You could not have unglued me from my chair. The music I loved and still love was so overwhelming and powerful. I could hardly contain myself. I could hardly breathe, was speechless and totally in and out of my element. In the reverie of my memories, I longed for and wished that my father could have shared this with me. But, well, maybe he was listening all along on the spiritual realm radio where he lives. Hang on, it gets better. In 2021, the AWA Vice President, Mike, gave me a tour of your amazing, incomparable, and extraordinary AWA museum. And lo and behold, I look up at one wall and it highlights in great big letters, Voice of America. Mr. Willis Conover was the voice of America, broadcasting jazz behind the Iron Curtain during the Cold War. He was the consummate broadcaster, airing the music of our American jazz musicians, playing freedom to a world that so wanted freedom. Mr. Conover was little known in the United States, but revered overseas. Much to my complete joy, Mike put on some Voice of America CDs so I could hear Willis Conover, something we Americans could not hear in the United States. I was enthralled and thrilled. Willis Conover had put the Salute to Duke Ellington on at the White House in 1969 to celebrate Mr. Ellington's 70th birthday. Hang on, it gets unbelievable. As I said, my first Colorado Jazz Party was the Labor Day weekend of 1972, and 500 people are attending this invitation-only party in the ballroom of the Broadmoor Hotel in Colorado Springs with no reserved seats. And I wind up sitting next to Willis Conover for the entire weekend. having no idea at the time who he was. And here I was 49 years later at the AWA Museum, telling Mike that I knew Willis Conover, telling him the story I am sharing with you now, and that Willis Conover had sent me a postcard from Prague after that Labor Day weekend, a copy of which I sent to Mike. All because of the radio, my radio. Little did I know that radio, even the voices we hear on television, are the same as those on the radio. And one thing you might want to find is, check out, is a wonderful book on Willis Conover written by Terrence M. Ripmaster. And it's Willis Conover, Broadcasting Jazz to the World. So that is a very special book. And I actually even have my little postcard from Prague with me that you can see if I'm holding this right. So this was very special for me to meet him and also have a weekend of those wonderful conversations and sharing the love of jazz. Hang on. This just gets too far out. And can you believe I have a radio program called Jazz Oasis, now in its 5th year, airing from WMNB LP 107.1 in North Adams, actually about 2 miles from the infamous cellar. And I also have a community TV program, Solutions Rising, which is also carried on WMNB, and some of the 15 stations it is aired on, which share it on their radio stations. And so many of those musicians I met at the Colorado Jazz Party, including Buddy Tate, Clark Terry, Maxine Sullivan, Phil Woods, Zoot Sims, Milt Hinton, Al Gray, James Moody, Ralph Sutton, Ross Tompkins, Roger Calloway, Alan Dawson, Dave McKenna, Gus Johnson, Joe Wilder, Carl Fontana, Bobby Rosengarten, Flip Phillips, George DeVivier, Larry Ridley, Major Holly, Joe Venuti, who treated me like a granddaughter, Bud Johnson, and on. All were way beyond any expectation I ever could have imagined. And wow, who could forget Eubie Blake at 97 years old at the Colorado Jazz Party, seen in the Great Colorado Mountain Jazz Party, filmed in 1976, and the very special meeting that same year of seeing and meeting Mrs. Louis Armstrong, Lucille. All of those previously nameless musicians I had heard on the radio throughout my growing up years became real people who actually talked to me, much to my amazement and near disbelief. And the production of that 1976 Colorado Jazz Party, I worked a little bit on that and was given this poster, an original poster from that party, which is thrilling. And in this poster, Ralph Sutton, those are Ralph Sutton's legs. That's Clark Terry, that's Buddy Tate, that's Carl Fontana. And if we can just zoom down a little bit, you can see all the names. And this movie was never released, but it did go on YouTube. So if you'd like to watch it, you can find it on YouTube. And there was also 1971, the year before I went, there was an album of the Colorado Jazz Party, and a lot of these musicians are on this. It's a 2 album. I understand in Europe there's a 3rd album, but I've never known that. And I will also show you Willis Conover put the salute to Duke Ellington on in 1969, and in Duke Ellington's book, Music is My Mistress, you can see a picture of that White House. This is a wonderful book that Duke Ellington wrote, and a fantastic performance. And also another book that showing the White House. And this is a book, and let me see. Nope, not that page, the next page. Over here. Over here, I'm sorry. This is also a picture of the White House party that Duke Ellington put on. And this is a book by Milt Hinton called Baseline. And it's an absolutely fantastic book. These are some books that are worth getting and reading. And here's one with pictures of Ralph Sutton, some paintings of Ralph Sutton, a wonderful piano player. His legs, you can see in that. So I'm doing a little show and tell here. And then this is my hat from the Colorado Jazz Party. And a lot of these you got a button every year. Some of those are musicians' button, but this is the Dick and Mattie Gibson Jazz Party. And this, I've had this hat for all these years with all my little buttons. And the last party that they had, which was in 1992, they were buttons that friends of Barb and Ed Battle made, friends of mine made of the musicians. And you could, I'm just trying to show you some of these wonderful little buttons, little mementos that I have. There's Phil Woods and Buddy Tate. It's wonderful. Phil Woods has played here in the Berkshires. Okay, so, and there, a friend gave me this wonderful book on seeing jazz, which just has phenomenal pictures and artistry of jazz musicians. That's a book worth having also. I'm trying to aim it for the camera. So, it must have been a mirage, this live radio show of musicians I was meeting. My goodness, the parade of high notes and musical fantasies coming to life was overwhelming and became my very own real radio panorama. That's what KeySpark has become to me today. We are all radio musicians, turning the dials and revving up the transistors and plugging in the cords to boomerang its necessity for all those young people the AWA is mentoring and educating today. The radio is not obsolete. It's perhaps more needed today than at any time in our country's or even the world's history. We could not have seen that more starkly and excruciatingly obvious than in Lahaina when the radio became tragically indispensable. And the extraordinary postcards from Lahaina that I'm going to share with you today are beautiful and tell us what we can recreate, what we can tell our young people, what we can show them that tells them that progress does not need to mean more or bigger or exclude anyone, that it can mean reconnecting us with our roots, the roots of the land and nature and the sound of the birds and the rush of the ocean waves and the cool breeze and being part of how important each of us is in this space called Earth if we choose to belong to it. Whatever innate curiosity I was born with that propelled me to create KeySpark, I so dearly believe that innate curiosity must, in whatever way possible, be passed on to the young people the AWA is mentoring, is reaching with the AWA mobile vans, in its Zoom programs, in its Morse code teachings, in its transmission of radio technology workings, and most important, in the sharing our wireless and radio stories intergenerationally with these lights of the future through guiding them with support and love. The M word, it was always the M words: music, mystical, magical, magnificent, Morse, and miles on to the T words, transcendent over those miles as troubadours. We are all troubadours playing our notes with a dot to a pause and a dash to slow down until we get to the most important letter, C, the children. Lahaina is the elephant in the room today and cannot be ignored, dismissed, or in any manner disregarded. Maybe the new purpose for radio is to be exactly what it became in Hawaii. What if all the experience, education, and know-how in this room become the old as new again? What if all the years of all the work in the booming broadcast years of the 1920s and all of our lives become the broadcast boomerang years of the 2020s and forward in the upcoming decades? What if the AWA has created a museum that's real purpose is to reach fruition as part of the solution for saving Mother Earth? We are Kahuku. We are the SS President sailing across the atmosphere's waves of wireless sounds to bring hope to a dying planet and provide solace, comfort, and real solutions to Lahaina and the rest of the world. We, the Antique Wireless Association, are the spark to light the way for refuge to those in need, to put tools in the hands of the young who follow us and need us so they are equipped to be the solution. We are all responsible for each other, but especially for our young people. We, the AWA, have enough grit and strength through forging these mentorships and ongoing educational programs to hand over those essential keys to our youth, knowing they will be fully prepared for life's upcoming obstacles. With the true love of freedom we all share, the best hopes, dreams, and creativity drive us forth and will not be stifled, will not be drowned by flood or fire, but will rise to the top because our individual transmitters just keep joining us together. Our higher selves can dominate our everyday reality, and the dots and dashes zooming up and around in the stratosphere just will not let go and hold us all together. What in heaven's name am I doing here? I am here because I belong here. We belong here together because each of us have different tools and gifts to share. My KeySpark collection belongs here because the Antique Wireless Association Museum is meaningful. It is educationally important. It is historically so very important. It is so relevant. And above all, it is alive. And once again, as in my KeySpark presentation on October 7th, 2021, I leave you with 88. Now, thank you. Now, please enjoy the KeySpark Travelogue.